Hey everybody, Bucky Badger W back here again today, and today I have a very fun video where I'm going to be going through the top 10 starting fives of all time if each team was led by the players that share the same letter of the first name. For example, we have here, this team didn't make the cut, but we have the letter H team led by Hal Greer, Hersey Hawkins, Harrison Barnes, Horace Grant, and Akeem Olajuwon. So, from there you can probably understand what we're going to be doing here. Just to be clear, the players are going to be listed by their first name by what they go by or what they are remembered by. Like, for example, Magic Johnson isn't going to be going under the E team, he's going to be going under the N team because people remember his first name or call him Magic. Same with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, even though his name was originally Lou Alcindor. For those that don't know, he's going to be on the letter K team because people call him Korean. So those should be some. Those are just some guidelines to follow. Let's get into the number 10 team. Starting at number 10, we have the letter T team. Starting lineup for this team is at point guard Tony Parker, shooting guard Terry Porter, small forward Tracy McGrady, power forward Tom Heinsohn, and center Tim Duncan. Now, I like what this team brings to the table because they have two very good playmakers on offense in Tony Parker and Terry Porter, along with two very versatile and good scorers in McGrady and Heinsohn, and then obviously a great offensive center in Tim Duncan and one of the greatest defenders ever in Duncan. I think the team fits well offensively with McGrady and Duncan probably being a great duo, although Tony Parker leading that pick and roll with Duncan is great also, along with obviously on defense. It's not, the whole unit isn't great, but it's anchored by one of the greatest defenders ever in Tim Duncan. Now at number 9, the letter C team. This team rolls out Chris Paul at point guard, Clyde Drexler at shooting guard, Carmelo Anthony at small forward, Charles Barkley power forward, and Chris Webber at center. I think this would be one of the most exciting teams to watch of any of the teams we're going to run through because, especially in transition, you have Chris Paul, a great facilitator at point guard, the point god. You have Clyde Drexler with some coming through with some highlight dunks. I think Carmelo Anthony is a very good floor spacer. Charles Barkley, obviously a bully down low, and Chris Webber kind of the same, but not to the same extent. I think the one weakness with this team, really, or not the one weakness, but the biggest weakness with this team is that they're undersized defensively with Melo and Barkley and Webber. So they're not going to be the greatest defensive team, but they're going to be very fun to watch, and they're the 9th best team in my opinion. Now on to the 8th best team, the letter G team. Starting lineup on said G team: at point guard Gary Payton, shooting guard Grant Hill, small forward George Gervin, power forward Giannis Antetokounmpo, and center George Mikan. This team isn't really a great fit, but they're extremely talented, and they'll be pretty much impossible to stop on the interior on offense with George Gervin, Giannis, George Mikan, three of some of the greatest offensive interior scorers of all time. It's a bad fitting team. You don't really have any floor spacers other than Grant Hill, I think. So that's not a great fit. And defense, it's gonna be pretty good with Peyton and Giannis, but it's not gonna be the best. But I think the team nonetheless is pretty good. And as I said, the fit is wonky, but the letter G team comes in at 8th here. Now the 7th best team for all the old heads out there, the letter B team. And I say it's for the old heads because this team, the most recent player on this team, the last season he played was in 1992, and that's Bernard King. The starting lineup for this team is at point guard Bob Cousy, shooting guard Bernard King, small forward Billy Cunningham, power forward Bob McAdoo, and center Bill Russell. Obviously, because of era, this team has its weaknesses and its strengths. Because of era, it's not going to be the best three-point shooting team. It's a pretty athletic team. People don't know that like Bill Russell was like an Olympic high jumper. So this team isn't really lacking in athleticism, but especially in outside shooting, it's not great. Now, you have a great passer in Cousy, Bernard King, a great scorer. Billy Cunningham, great defender. Bob McAdoo, great scorer and solid on defense. Bill Russell, probably the greatest defender of all time. So nobody's coming in to paint against this team. So I think that this team, it's really good. It's just, it doesn't have the outside shooting. It's lacking in some areas. Bill Russell is the best scorer, so it's lacking in some areas, but I think for the most part, this team is stacked, and that's why it's number 7 on this list. Now for the number 6 team on this list, you may notice a jump in talent from the B team going forward, but it's the letter J team. This team is stacked with Jerry West at point guard, James Harden at shooting guard, Julius Erving, Dr. J at small forward, James Worthy at power forward, and Joel Embiid at center. I mean, it's crazy that this is only the 6th best team because Joel Embiid, you can make an argument, Joel Embiid is the only one of these players that isn't a top 35 player of all time. I mean, you have Jerry West, James Harden, who are both generational scorers, amazing. They're also both elite playmakers, and James Worthy is very, very, very good off the ball and in transition, so I think he'll fit very well with those guys. Julius Erving, he'll make some crazy plays with that athleticism. And then Joel Embiid, I think he's kind of weaker than these other centers on here, on some of the other teams. But also at the same time, I think he's a solid center. And, if we're saying these guys are in their primes, all of them, what he's been doing this past season is incredible. So I think that's why he deserves to be on this team. But I think for the most part, this team is unstoppable offensively. He just needs to do his job defensively. But then also, how do you stop this team on offense with West, Harden, Dr. J, James Worthy? It's impossible. This J team, number 6, maybe should be higher. Now to the number 5 team. Maybe some of you think they should be a little lower, but the letter L team. Now this team rolls out Lucius Allen at point guard, Latrell Sprewell at shooting guard, Larry Nance at center, but Larry Bird and LeBron James at small forward and power forward respectively. Now let's cut to the chase here. Lucius Allen is probably the worst player you'll see on any of these teams. No disrespect to him, but it's probably the case. Latrell Sprewell is a good scorer, but he's not amazing. Larry Nance is very athletic, but once again, he's not, he doesn't pop off the screen. But you got Larry Bird and LeBron James, and I think when you have Larry Bird and LeBron James, you have to be high on my list. We know what Bird is. He may be the most skilled offensive player in all of NBA history. You can make arguments for like Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving. I think Bird has to be up there. Obviously, we know what LeBron is, ridiculously athletic, one of the greatest scorers, passers, perimeter defenders of all time. In my opinion, the second greatest player of all time. Larry Bird, obviously great. So I think just with those two combined, you have to be really high on my list. I'm sorry. Now on to the number 4 team, which corresponds with their letter, the letter D team. This team rolls out a crazy starting 5 of Damian Lillard at point guard, Dwayne Wade at shooting guard, Dominique Wilkins, the human highlight reel, at small forward, Dirk Nowitzki at power forward, and David Robinson at center. But here's the thing, since most of these teams are like older, since it's all-time teams and most players before like the 2000s aren't necessarily great shooters, most of these teams aren't great shooting teams. That is not the case with this team, and I think that's probably their biggest strength. Because they have Damian Lillard, who we know can shoot from outer space, one of the greatest shooters of all time. Dirk Nowitzki, in my opinion, probably the greatest big man shooter of all time. You make an argument for other guys like maybe Cat, but I think it's probably Dirk. And then you have some good shooters in Wade and Wilkins also. So I think those are some great fits. Also, obviously, just Lillard, Nowitzki, Wilkins, and especially Wade. They're all especially good at getting their own shots. And this team will be very good offensively. David Robinson, a very good offensive center as well. And one of the most underrated players, and a guy that isn't talked a lot about in all-time discussions, although I think he's a great player all-time. And then on defense, I really like Wade and Wilkins, but especially Wade. His ability on the defensive end as a guard rim protector, and then David Robinson, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, great shot blocker. So this team, it's stacked. and that's why obviously they're the number 4 team in this power ranking. On to the number 3 team now. Pains me to put them this low because my name is Sam, but the letter S team. Now, before we get into the letter S team, I just want to say that this team and the other 2 teams, who a majority of you probably already know who those teams are, but the letter S team and the other 2 teams, they're definitely a tier above, and they're really interchangeable. Any of them could be number 1. And as you look at the starting lineup, it's really hard to believe that this isn't the best team, but I promise you the other teams are pretty good also. At point guard, they have Steve Nash, shooting guard Steph Curry, small forward Scottie Pippen, power forward Shawn Kemp, and center Shaquille O'Neal. Now this team is basically unstoppable on offense, I think. They have maybe the best pick and roll combo of all time in a prime Steve Nash and Shaquille O'Neal. That's basically impossible to stop with Nash's passing ability, and obviously Shaq being maybe the most dominant big man of all time. You have Steph Curry, the best shooter of all time, easily. You can't leave him open. And then you have 2 very good off-ball players and just slashers in Pippen and Shawn Kemp. Now, defense is worse than offense. It isn't necessarily a whole, but it's definitely worse than the offense. I think the problems here are definitely Nash and Curry. They can definitely be targeted on defense, which is probably the tiebreaker of why they're number 3 here. But Pippen, obviously one of the best wing defenders of all time. Kemp, amazing defender. Shaquille O'Neal, when locked in, is amazing. So I think really this is arguably the best offense that we have on here. And the defense is amazing too. You can make a very, very, very good argument for them being number 1. Yeah, this team is amazing. Now here we go on to the number 2 team. Another pretty amazing team, the letter M team. The letter M team consists of Magic Johnson at point guard, Michael Jordan at shooting guard, 2 top 4 players of all time in my opinion, but we'll get into that. Manu Ginobili at small forward, Marc Gasol at power forward, and Moses Malone at center. And this team, I think, is a little better version of that letter L team that we had, because I think you have Magic Johnson, who obviously a very different play style than Larry Bird, but I mean, they were rivals back in their day. Magic Johnson, I think, is the greatest passer of all time. He's just a little better version of Bird, even though he's probably not the scorer that Bird is, but like I said, he's the best playmaker, best passer of all time, pretty undisputedly. Jordan is the best player of all time. I think he's the greatest player of all time, but I think he's pretty undisputedly the best player of all time in his prime, which is why he's probably the best player for this practice. He's the greatest scorer of all time. He's a great perimeter defender, very underrated playmaker. We know what Jordan is. You got Manu Ginobili, who's great playing with other superstars. We worked with that in the Spurs dynasty that he was a big part of, where he's the 6th man there. And then you have a kind of a weird fit at power forward and center with Gasol and Malone, who are both more centers, so they'll have trouble moving their feet on the outside against, very good perimeter scorers. But I think that it'll work out because they're both very good rim protectors, and I like Malone's scoring and rebounding underneath. He's probably the greatest offensive rebounder of all time. Not that they'll be needing a lot of that with Jordan and Magic Johnson, but for the majority of this, it's really just how can you put a team with Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan with that supporting cast below number 2? I mean, you'll see how good the number 1 team is, but how can you put that team low? In my opinion, you just can't. They're the number 2 best team. And now on to the big reveal, the number 1 team, the best team here, the letter K team. This team rolls out a ridiculous starting 5 of Kyle Lowry, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, Kevin Garnett, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I think this team is probably better than the other team. I mean, you can definitely make an argument for obviously any of the top 3 teams, but I like this team defensively just a little more than I like those other 2 teams. With Kobe, an elite perimeter defender, same with Kyle Lowry. KD is a very underrated defender. I think he's a very good perimeter defender as well with that size. And then you have Kevin Garnett, the most versatile and maybe best IQ defender of all time. He's probably top 5 at least if you're making a list of greatest defenders of all time. And then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, great rim protector, I mean, this team is stacked. Also offensively, I mean, Kyle Lowry, very good playmaker. He can knock down shots. Kevin Durant, he's a great shooter, one of the greatest scorers of all time. Just ISO, especially if you have other guys taking the pressure off him. Kobe Bryant, great ISO scorer, obviously, especially if he just gets to go one-on-one. Kevin Garnett, pick and roll guy, he's going to be amazing. And then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar down there at center. He's probably the greatest scorer at center, of any center of all time. So that's why I think this team is the number one team that we've gone through. Just basically everywhere on the court, anything that you could possibly want, they're one of the best at it. So I think the letter K team, you are the best team here. But yeah, that should do it for this list. Thank you for watching. But before we go, let's go through some honorable mention teams that were good but just quite didn't make the cut. First off, we have the letter P team led by Penny Hardaway, Pete Maravich, Paul Gasol, Paul Pierce, and Patrick Ewing. We have the letter W team, Walt Frazier, Wally Szczerbiak, Willis Reed, Will Chamberlain, Wayman Tisdale. Letter A team, Allen Iverson, Adrian Dantley, Alex English, Anthony Davis, Alonzo Mourning. R team, Russell Westbrook, Ray Allen, Reggie Miller, Rasheed Wallace, and Robert Parrish. So, I mean, some good teams that didn't make the cut here. But yeah, that should do it for this video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.